Hello, imaginary friends, and welcome to the Imaginaries Literary Podcast. Hi, I'm Timothy, and on this episode, we will be reading a short story that I wrote entitled Sticks and Stones. I hope you enjoy.
Hubert Fitzmaurice was a man of many strange qualities, not the least of which was his name. He had oddities and quirks to spare. He would, for instance, always wear his right sock inside out and his left sock right side in. There was no particular reason for it, and even Hubert didn't quite know when or how it had come about. But the strangest quality that he possessed, no doubt, was that whenever he placed his hands in his pockets, he would find there a smooth black stone. This oddity was no fault of his, of course, but what he did with the stones was equally strange. Whenever a black stone would appear, he would promptly go down to the wine cellar and hide it in one of the empty casks. "They are mine, after all," he would say to himself, and one never knows when he will need a smooth stone. This quirk was made odder by the fact that he kept the utmost secrecy about it. He told not a soul, either about the stones appearing in his pocket or about his stockpile. "They are mine, after all," he would repeat to himself, and one has the right to collect stones in private. What business is it of anyone else?" Hubert lived on an island that had suffered from severe drought for almost 100 years. It had once been green and lush, with many orchards and pastures, but now it was quite barren. The people of the island struggled to make a living, and they had almost all become fishermen. And all they ever had to eat was fish. Fish is fine if you eat it every now and then, but to eat it every meal of every day was quite unbearable. Hubert himself could hardly stand fish, which was in every respect highly unfortunate. It happened that one day, as he was talking with his friend Alfred Omenich, he inadvertently put his hand in his pocket. This was something he tried never to do in public for fear that his secret would be discovered. Ordinarily, if such a blunder had been made, he would keep his hand in his pocket until he could get home. But he had visited Alfred on the expressed purpose of burrowing in an anvil, though for what purpose I cannot say.
"Wait here," Alfred was just saying. I'll get the anvil for you at once."
You needn't bother," Hubert replied, feeling extremely self-conscious. "Perhaps I'll come back for it another time."
"But you are already here. Why come again? Wait, I'll be back in a moment."
As soon as Alfred had turned to fetch the anvil, Hubert took his hand from his pocket and threw the stone into a nearby hollow. As much as he disliked losing a smooth stone, he knew that he would need both hands to carry the anvil, and that it was better to avoid the questions that Alfred would no doubt ask if he saw it. "They are mine, after all," he reasoned, "and I can throw them out if I please." 3 weeks later, when Hubert went to return the anvil, he noticed a small tree just peeking over the edge of the hollow where he had thrown the stone. It was little more than the size of a bush, but since Hubert had never seen either, he hardly knew the difference. Leaving the anvil on the road, he rushed to examine the tree. From the branches of the tree hung small globes of deep red. When he pulled on one of them, it came free. It had a sweet smell, so he decided to try a small bite of it. At once he vowed that he would never eat fish again. He gathered as much of the fruit as he could, and forgetting about the anvil entirely, rushed back to his home. That night he went back with an axe and a shovel. As quietly as he could, he chopped down the tree and buried it. "It came from my stone, after all," he told himself as he worked. "And I've the right to do what I want with it." The next day, after a breakfast completely devoid of fish, he built a high wall round his land. When the wall was finished, he went down into the cellar and opened up the casks that contained the smooth black stones. He grabbed a handful of them and scattered them about his land. Before the month was out, his orchard was flourishing. To his surprise, every tree looked different and bore different fruit. Hubert was extremely happy, for a while. But as time went on, the trees kept growing bigger and bigger, and Hubert grew more and more worried that his secret would be discovered. The fact was that the other islanders had already noticed something strange about Hubert. More strange than usual, that is. In the first place, there was the sudden appearance of the wall round his land. Then there was his noticeable absence from the fish market by the harbour. And lately, Hubert had been seen working from time to time, making his wall higher, till it looked more like a fortress than a home. When Alfred came to check on his friend, for he had found his anvil on the side of the road without even a note of explanation, Hubert would not even open the door more than a crack to talk to him. When Alfred insisted that they must talk face to face, Hubert slipped through the door and closed it behind him, rather than inviting his friend inside. Hubert evaded Alfred's inquiries with the simple answer, "I have the right to my privacy. It is mine, after all." All this time, Hubert's orchard was slowly transforming into a garden. Grass grew in the shade of the trees. Flowers appeared, first in ones and twos, then by the dozen. Birds visited, building nests in the high branches and singing out cheerfully to one another. "How happy we are to have found this place! It is only a pity that it should be hidden behind that wall." Hubert hardly noticed this change, because he was always worrying about what would happen if his secret should be discovered. Outside of his garden, however, things were getting worse. The fish had grown tired of losing their game of hide-and-seek with the fishermen, and decided it was time to move to a different neighbourhood. The fishermen tried in vain to locate where the fish had gone. In the meantime, the islanders went hungry. Every day the fishing fleets would go out in a new direction. Every day they would come back empty-handed to their worried wives and crying children. But one day Hubert heard the sound of laughter in his orchard. He looked out the window and saw 2 children playing in one of the trees, hungrily devouring the sweet fruit. The children had seen the top of one of the trees over a section of the wall that Hubert had neglected to build up. They had never seen a tree before, and were so curious that they had snuck in. They danced with joy when they saw the beautiful garden, and ran barefoot through the trees, collecting flowers and climbing up the big trees. Then they discovered the fruit, and they thought they had found heaven. When Hubert saw how delighted the children were, he felt ashamed that he had kept his orchard a secret. "They were given to me, after all," he said. "Perhaps they were given to me to share with everyone else." Hubert knocked down his wall and invited all the islanders to a feast of fresh fruit. He begged them to forgive him for his selfishness, and because the islanders were good-natured and extremely hungry, they forgave him at once. The next day he took all the seeds he had left and scattered them all over the island, and the island grew to be lush and prosperous once again. If you visit the island today, you will see a very happy old man sitting in a garden full of playing children, wearing one sock inside out and the other right side in, pulling seeds out of his pocket and giving them to the children to go and plant.
Nice. Very nice. Yay! Yeah, yay! Cheers. Awesome.
That was for Timothy, not for me.
No, I was gonna say it's definitely for the book. So Timothy, how do you feel about this story being out there now? Well, first of all, well done on the story.
Thank you.
I think it's fantastic. It's so super fun. But have your work out there into the world, like just out there. How does that make you feel?
Yeah, it's fun. Especially having Dan read it. It's he did such a good job with it that it's how I want people to experience my work.
Always with Daniel reading it.
Always with Daniel reading it. Ideally, everyone who reads my work would be sitting by a fire in a comfy armchair, and Daniel sitting in the chair next to them, reading out loud to them.
That's going to be an expensive book. Along with the price of the book, you're going to get this guy to come with you everywhere every time you want to read it.
I mean, I would do it. But Gabriel would need to come too. So
yeah. Might not be quite as relaxing.
So when you're hearing Daniel reading it, are you listening to it thinking like, "Oh, I should have done that line different. Oh, that worked," or like that worked out perfectly, or like what is your thought when you're hearing it?
Interestingly, when he reads it, I just kind of enjoy it.
Oh,
Um,
like it's
I,
something new, like not
yeah,
yours?
I get to kind of
That's what you
experience
said.
it like it's something new. It's different when I'm reading over the files on my computer.
Sure.
I'm more analyzing things, but when I hear Dan read it, it's more like, "Ooh, this is fun. This is a fun story. I like where this is going,"
Yeah.
and I get to kind of experience it
Where is it going?
as if it's not my work.
Is it because he's bringing in a new element with his voice and like his accents and things? Is that
Stop
why
making it
it's
about me. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. Um, when I write it, there's definitely there's a voice in my head that I'm hearing. Um, so having that different voice, having the different cadence, the pacing, makes it fresh and new. And I really enjoy it.
I'm curious, like so we worked on it. You said you like it, and I know you would be honest. Um, was it the same? And in what ways was it not the same as what you had in your head? You know what I mean?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if I could describe what's the same and what's different. I think it's just the nuance of your voice and the way that you read, which is so rich. I feel like you add richness to it in both the the quality of your voice, but also the pacing in which you read,
Mm.
um, makes it come alive in a different way than when I'm writing it or when I'm reading it on my own. So
So where did this story come from? Like I mean, I think for everybody we've covered this or we've talked about it individually. But where did this story come from? And I know that our stories come from all different places. Sometimes it's like
yeah,
an
I mean
inspiration or whatever.
the germ of it was probably somewhere in my mind for about 10 years before I wrote the story. And it started with this idea of like just talking to a friend of mine of like, wouldn't it be like cool or random if like every time you put your hand in your pocket, you pulled out a coin and like you just could forever pull up coins out of your pocket,
Yes.
but like it was always just a coin. So you couldn't like become a millionaire or something, but just like you knew you always had like the backup of like, I need to pay for something. Just give me a second. Okay, yeah, here you go.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like, I guess, the first germ of this particular story. But then years later, I read the short story "A Selfish Giant," "The Selfish Giant" by Oscar Wilde, um, which is an amazing fairy tale. He wrote a couple very amazing fairy tales. That being one of them. The other one being The Little Prince. So
Mm.
a lot
Hmm.
of the, I'd say, structure of the story was inspired by that by that story, but it's a much more serious story than the one I wrote. So I kind of added this whole quirkiness
Yeah.
to it.
So maybe more the Oscar Wilde.
Yeah. So it was kind of years of little bits coming together before I sat down and wrote it, and I actually wrote the whole thing in one sitting. Kind of, there's a moment where all these little pieces of inspiration kind of fit together, and you're like, oh, this is a complete thing.
Mhm.
And then it all just kind of tumbled out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you sat down, you didn't necessarily know entirely what it was about.
Um, no, I kind of knew roughly the theme that I was playing with. I had this idea of, this guy who every time he puts his hand in his pocket, he pulls something out, and had the idea of it being something that he didn't understand in the beginning. He thinks it's a stone, but they're really seeds,
Mm.
and
Hmm.
he
Mm.
lives in a barren place, so he doesn't know what a seed is. So
Right.
um, but yeah, I had enough of the pieces of the puzzle to be able to sit down and go, okay, let's just put all of this together and
Right.
see what comes out of it.
You planted that stone and it. Huh. But I think that's really cool. Did you base the island off of any island in particular, like Hawaii or
Or place.
anything, or like a specific city or whatever?
No, not a particular location. Um,
Just your own desiccated heart.
yeah, yeah, and I had just gone through like a bit of a burnout. Um, it I'd been working in the film industry for a couple of years
Mm,
and was just kind of fed up and walked away from it. And this was kind of my first creative endeavor after like
oh,
9 months of like literally doing nothing creative.
yeah.
Um, so in a way, it was kind of a metaphor as well for like rediscovering life
Yeah.
and creativity after a long season of just nothing,
Hmm.
dead, dry. Um, so
How about the names?
Oh, love the
Which I
names.
like,
Oh,
but
they're
I don't.
great.
So especially with Alfred Olmernig, I'm not entirely sure. Like, for whatever reason, you start reading the first sentence, you get the name of the guy. That name just made sense to me, and maybe it's because Alfred Olmernig sounds more Swedish or something, and first name sounds more English to me. But I don't know. Tell us the names.
um yeah, basically just was trying to think of very like quirky random names.
Hmm.
um
Well done.
I've always thought that like Hubert was just a really quirky, funny sounding name.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And my great grandpa was named Hubert.
Oh,
But
that's
like
awesome.
it's still just kind of like a funny, like it's a funny name to say, Hubert.
Mhm.
um and then as a little bit inspired with the Fitzmaurice part with Tangled, the Flynn writer's real name, which was Eugene,
Right.
it's Herbert or something like that.
Fitzherbert. Yeah, that
Mhm.
is Fitzherbert.
Which
Oh, that's
again I
fun.
thought was just like it's this really funny moment, right?
Yeah.
In the movie where that's like his confession moment, where it's like my name is really this, not
Yeah.
Flynn Rider.
Mhm.
Um, so I kind of took some of that and changed it, made it something that I didn't want to like just completely copy it, but was definitely there's a little seed of inspiration there. Um, I honestly don't remember anymore where the Almernick part came from for Alfred's name, other than it was kind of unusual.
Yeah.
Um,
That's awesome.
I feel
but
like it's got to be an anagram or something.
It's like almost like almanac is how I thought of it. Like, is he like somebody
yeah.
who's going to be like, like the weather or, like what the seasons are like or whatever. And it was
Mhm.
interesting because then he is planting seeds. And so there are like different, that adds a whole new element to the cycles of life because you're seeing the trees bear fruit and whatever. And so I thought it had something to maybe do with that. But maybe not.
Yeah, I honestly I don't remember. It's so long ago now,
Yeah.
that I don't recall where I got that name from.
For me, when I was reading it, I was reading it to give you feedback, right? And as just a friend and colleague, as it were, and trying to give you useful feedback, and then to decide how I wanted to voice it. But in the end, it spoke to me almost too much to give you useful feedback sometimes, and it was easier to voice it than to give you useful feedback, if that makes any sense. But because it has a good flow, I think, and a good um, I don't know, the meaning is consistent. Like every section of the story has a purpose in the story, and it fulfills, like it contributes to the ultimate, you know, uh, not just in a sort of climbing action sort of thing. But the inner and outer journeys, all of that. But anyway, all of that sort of science of it aside, it really, I needed to read it, honestly. Like, personally, I've been having so many difficulties in different parts of my life. And when you read a story like this about somebody who has been taking things out of their pocket and hiding them away, it helps you to feel that. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but it helps me to feel that there's something. Like, there may not be any fish. There may not be, I might have to go borrow an anvil because I don't even have that. I don't know why, but I need to borrow my anvils. I don't even have that.
That's great.
And there's that one guy who's probably as quirky as me in some way, but I'll have to borrow that from. Point is, like, somewhere there's a stone, and I'm hiding it. And sometimes when there are issues in your life, I think you're so willing to think about, well, it's because of this person, or it's because of this situation, or it's because of, if I could just get out of this job, or I can get out of this relationship. We're so quick to kind of blame everything, and ultimately, it's not that, like, it was his fault. It's not that he was a bad person. He just wasn't able to see the potential. He wasn't even able until he just happened to throw that thing where it needed to be.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is a beautiful thing, because you did it blamelessly, without laying the guilt of it on him or on anyone else. And then he's redeemed. The whole island is redeemed. And that's just, it's something to hope for. Whether it's logical to hope for it or not, we need the hope.
Good. Well, Daniel,
And
throw
thank you
those
for
seeds,
that.
man. Throw those seeds, Daniel.
Yeah, you throw those seeds. We're throwing seeds. That's what this is.
Yeah.
Let's throw some seeds.
That's great, though. That's awesome. How does that make you feel, Timothy?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome, Dan. Yeah, I feel like that was part of my process as I was writing this story, was realizing, after, hoarding my creativity and not using it for such a long time, of like, no, I need to express it, and I need to share it, and not just keep it to myself. And it's again funny that, like, even just the process of you reading it is the fruit of that is getting shared, like in this story. And there are very similar things that I was wrestling through at the time, right before writing it. So
Did it help?
I think it's cool that it expresses something similar in you.
Do you think that you are able to process through your issues, or what the things that you were going through at the time by writing that book?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I mean, in therapy, they tell you a lot of times, like, write out what's going on, just like start writing things about your daily life, even like just as simple as that. And it helps you like process emotions, but then you're going much higher, and you're writing at a much better, like, metaphors and imagery and all that good stuff, to where it is way deeper than just reading about somebody's day and processing or whatever. So you're not only processing it for yourself, you're processing it for the reader, hopefully, which is incredible. That's awesome.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, it did. Like, Daniel
at least
is proof.
it did for Dan. I
Yeah.
don't know if for anyone else, but yeah. And I think that's one of the things that's powerful for me about writing stories, is even journeys that aren't complete, I can imagine where it can go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm not Hubert. But there is definitely an element of what I was going through that is represented by him. Right. He's not a carbon copy of me, but there's definitely a piece of me that I needed to process that is Hubert.
Yeah.
And I had not arrived at the point of tearing down the walls and letting all the villagers into the orchard when I wrote the story.
Right.
I was kind of at the point of like, oh wait, there's a little bush over there. What is that?
Right.
Like that's
Right.
about that's about the point in the like the journey that I wrote the story, but helping make sense of the process I was going through by projecting this is where I want to go. And not just processing where I've been, but also going, okay, there's an arc here. This is part of a story, and there's purpose and meaning to this journey. It's not just random events.
Mm-hmm.
I think is also something that it helps me process when I'm writing.
Yeah.
So it's more than just a journal, although it definitely helps process what I've been feeling and going through. But there's that arc moving forward of where do I want to be? Where could this go?
Right.
That then helps give me direction to move forward.
Do you think that you're now, since the book is out there, are you now having the orchard and the walls down that you're now
Well,
sharing? Are you at that
well,
moment finally?
maybe I've got 2 kids in the orchard eating the fruit right now.
That's
Who does
great.
he mean?
Um,
Huh. That's awesome.
so that might be about where I'm at
That's great.
on
That's
that
awesome.
journey. But
Wait a minute. Were you thinking of us when you mentioned the 2 kids? Because there are 2 kids in the orchard.
yeah,
But you said it 10 years ago.
yeah.
so
Just
you
now when
probably
I
were-
mentioned the 2 kids in the orchard, yeah, that's you 2 guys.
Now it is, but not when
yeah.
you were writing it.
Not when I was writing it.
No, no. All right. Well, Timothy, thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody
I
who has
do.
watched appreciates it. And if you have, please tell us in the comments. What did you like? What did you think the stones/seas represented, and how did it help you in your life? If it did, that'd be awesome. Timothy,
And
before
what
we
is the anvil?
and what is the anvil?
What
And
is
what
the
is the
anvil?
purpose? What is the purpose of the anvil?
I don't want us to talk about it. I want them to figure it out.
Oh, okay. Yes. So tell us in the comments. So Timothy, tell us, where can people find more of your work? Where can we support you? And what are you working on now?
Yeah, so you can find more of my work at timothyhamiltonauthor.com. And you can subscribe to my Patreon and get access to short stories, poems, and books that I've written. And I'm currently working on a brand new fairy tale set in the little village in France that I live in.
Awesome. I'm excited about it. I know a little bit about
too.
it, and that's really, really, really exciting. Look out for more of Timothy's work. Also, if you could share, subscribe, like, it would be extremely helpful to us all. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.